The stars were beautiful until everything went wrong. Captain Jake Morrison watched his ship's engine readings spike into dangerous levels as alarms screamed through the bridge of the UES Navigator. He had been exploring the outer systems for 3 months, mapping new worlds for Earth's colonial program when the fusion core began overheating beyond any safe parameters. Jake's hands moved quickly over the control panels, trying to stabilize the failing systems. The engine temperature climbed higher despite his efforts. He knew the ship would explode within minutes if he could not find a solution. The nearest inhabited world showed on his scanners as Kepler 442b, a planet with breathable atmosphere and signs of advanced civilization. The explosion came sooner than expected. Jake felt the ship shudder as the engine core ruptured, sending metal fragments through the hull like deadly rain. Emergency systems kicked in, sealing breached compartments, but the damage was already too severe. The Navigator began falling toward the planet below, its hull glowing red from atmospheric friction. Jake strapped himself into the pilot seat and fought to control the dying ship's descent. He managed to angle the crash toward what looked like an empty field on the planet's surface. The impact threw him against his restraints with bone-crushing force. Everything went black as the ship carved a deep furrow across the alien landscape. The Zilani found him 3 hours later. They were tall, graceful beings with skin that seemed made of living crystal. Soft blue light pulsed beneath their transparent flesh in patterns that showed their emotions. They had been monitoring the strange object that fell from the sky and approached carefully with their rescue equipment. Lyra Lai was the first to reach the crashed ship. She served as the chief healer for her settlement and had seen many injuries during her long life. When she found Jake trapped in the wreckage, his body broken and bleeding, she was amazed he still lived. Any Zilani with such injuries would have died instantly. The rescue team worked for hours to free Jake from the twisted metal. They used their advanced tools to cut through the ship's hull while Lyra Lai kept him stable with her medical devices. His strange alien biology puzzled her. His bones were incredibly dense, his muscles tough as cables, and his blood carried oxygen in ways she had never seen before. They brought Jake to their healing center in the main settlement. The building was made from grown crystal that could channel healing energies directly into patients. Lyra Lai worked around the clock to understand how his body functioned so she could save his life. She had to invent new treatments because nothing in her medical knowledge applied to this alien physiology. Jake drifted in and out of consciousness for days. When he finally awakened fully, he found himself in a room filled with soft, colorful light. Lyra Lai sat beside his bed, her crystalline features showing patterns of relief and curiosity. She had learned some of his language from the ship's computer systems. "You are safe now," she told him in careful English. "I am Lyra Lai. We found you in the metal thing that fell from sky." Jake tried to sit up, but pain shot through his entire body. 3 ribs were broken, his left arm was in some kind of energy cast, and bandages covered dozens of smaller wounds. He should have been dead from such injuries, but somehow the alien healer had saved him. "Thank you," he managed to say. "My name is Jake Morrison. I'm from Earth." Over the following weeks, Jake learned about the Zilani people. They were incredibly advanced in science and technology, but they were also gentle souls who valued art, music, and philosophy above all else. Their entire culture was built around harmony and peaceful coexistence. The settlement was beautiful beyond anything Jake had ever seen. Crystal buildings grew from the ground like living trees, their walls shifting colors with the time of day. Gardens filled with alien flowers surrounded every structure, tended by Zilani who sang to their plants to help them grow. But Jake noticed something troubling as he recovered. Armed guards patrolled the settlement's borders. These guards were not Zilani. They were shorter, heavily built creatures with dark scales and cruel eyes. They carried energy weapons and watched the Zilani with obvious contempt. "Who are those? Soldiers?" Jake asked Lyra Lai during one of his therapy sessions. Her light patterns dimmed to sad blues and grays. "They are Korthak. They rule us now. They came to our world 50 years ago and made us their slaves. We work for them, create technology for them, solve problems for them. In return, they let us live." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "Why don't you fight back? Your technology is clearly more advanced than theirs. Lyralay's patterns shifted to confused spirals. Fight? We do not understand this word in the way you mean it. We are healers and builders, not destroyers. The Korthak have weapons that can kill thousands. If we resist, they will hurt our children. It is better to serve and live than to fight and die. But this isn't living, Jake said, his voice growing stronger as his body healed. This is just existing. My people have a saying, give me liberty or give me death. Sometimes freedom is worth any price. As the days passed, Jake told Lyra stories about human history. He spoke of revolutions against tyrants, of people who fought impossible odds for the right to live free. He described how humans had overcome slavery, defeated dictators, and refused to surrender even when victory seemed impossible. The Zilani healer listened with growing fascination. These concepts were alien to her people, but something about them sparked a feeling she had never experienced before. It was like a flame growing in her chest, warm and bright and demanding action. 3 months after the crash, Jake's rescue beacon finally connected with Earth's communication network. A response came back within hours. A rescue ship was already on its way and would arrive in approximately 8 months. Jake should prepare for extraction from the alien world. But when Jake read the message, he made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. I'm not leaving yet, he told Lyralai. You saved my life when you didn't have to. You could have left me in that wreckage, but you chose to help a complete stranger from another world. Now I'm going to help you. Lyralai's light patterns swirled, with confusion and hope. Help us how? Jake smiled, and for the first time since the crash, it was not a smile of pain, but of determination. I'm going to teach you something my people learned long ago. I'm going to teach you how to be free. Jake began teaching the Zilani about rebellion in secret meetings held after the Korthak guards finished their daily rounds. He met with small groups in hidden chambers beneath the crystal buildings, speaking in whispers about concepts that seemed impossible to his gentle hosts. Freedom isn't given, Jake explained to a gathering of 12 Zilani workers. It's taken. Throughout human history, oppressed people have found ways to resist their oppressors, even when those oppressors seemed all-powerful. Lyralai translated his words into the Zilani light language for those who couldn't understand English. The patterns that rippled across their crystalline skin showed confusion, mixed with growing excitement. These ideas were foreign to them, but something deep inside responded to Jake's message. Theron, a young engineer who maintained the settlement's power systems, was the first to truly embrace Jake's teachings. His light patterns burned brighter than the others when Jake spoke about resistance. What can we do? He asked. The Korthak watch us constantly. They count every tool, every component, every piece of equipment. Jake smiled. That's exactly the problem with tyrants. They think they can control everything, so they don't expect the unexpected. Let me tell you about something humans call sabotage. Over the next several weeks, Jake taught them subtle forms of resistance. Instead of building equipment that worked perfectly for the Korthak, they would introduce tiny flaws that would cause failures later. A power coupling might burn out after exactly 100 hours instead of lasting forever. A computer processor might develop glitches that seemed random, but followed patterns only the Zilani understood. The beauty of their plan was that the Korthak never suspected deliberate sabotage. The failures looked like normal equipment wear or manufacturing defects. When questioned, the Zilani would express confusion and offer to fix the problems immediately, which they always did with apparent dedication. Theron proved especially gifted at this new form of resistance. He programmed subtle errors into navigation, systems that would cause Korthak ships to arrive at their destinations several hours late. He installed power fluctuations in their communication equipment that would cut off important calls at crucial moments. Each act was small and seemingly accidental, but together they began to frustrate the Korthak overseers. As confidence grew among the Zilani, Jake introduced more advanced concepts. He taught them about information warfare, showing them how to listen to Korthak communications and learn about their military operations. He explained how resistance movements on Earth had used networks of ordinary people to pass messages and coordinate actions. Lyra became the heart of their growing resistance network. Her position as chief healer gave her access to every part of the settlement, and her natural authority among the Zilani made others trust her completely. She began identifying potential allies and slowly expanding their secret organization. The first major success came when Theron managed to disable the settlement's main surveillance system for exactly 17 minutes during a shift change. The Korthak guards noticed nothing, but during those 17 minutes, Jake and 30 Zilani volunteers moved critical supplies to hidden locations throughout the settlement. Jake felt proud of his alien friends, but he also knew their activities couldn't remain secret forever. The Korthak weren't stupid, just overconfident. Eventually, someone would notice the patterns in the equipment failures and growing boldness among the Zilani workers. That someone turned out to be Commander Vexthor, the Korthak overseer, who ruled the settlement with an iron fist. He was larger than most of his species, with black scales that seemed to absorb light and eyes like burning coals. Unlike his subordinates, Vexthor had survived dozens of military campaigns and knew how to recognize the signs of brewing rebellion. The first sign was efficiency reports showing increased equipment failures across all departments. The second was behavioral analysis indicating that Zilani workers were showing more independence and taking longer to respond to orders. The third was the discovery of unauthorized gatherings in parts of the settlement that should have been empty during night cycles. Vexthor ordered a complete investigation of the settlement's activities. His security teams began conducting surprise inspections and interrogating Zilani workers about their duties and whereabouts. The questioning was brutal by Zilani standards, involving isolation from their community and exposure to painful frequencies of light. During one of these interrogations, a young Zilani named Kale broke under pressure and revealed that the strange alien who had crashed on their world was teaching them things about resistance. Vexthor's eyes blazed with fury when he learned that his perfectly controlled settlement was being corrupted by an outsider. "Find this alien," Vexthor commanded his security chief. "Bring him to me alive so I can learn what poison he has been spreading among my workers. Then execute him publicly so the others understand the price of defiance." Jake knew the end was coming when Lyra rushed to his hiding place with patterns of panic flashing across her skin. "They know about you," she said. "They're searching. Every building, every tunnel, every hidden space. You must run." But Jake had been expecting this moment. He had prepared for it by studying the settlement's layout and identifying escape routes that would take him beyond Korthak patrols. More importantly, he had prepared the Zilani for what would come next. "Listen to me carefully," he told the small group gathered around him. "What happens to me doesn't matter. What matters is that you continue the work we started. You've learned that you don't have to accept oppression. You've tasted freedom, and now you can never go back to being slaves." Theron stepped forward, his light patterns showing determination mixed with fear. "We will continue, but how can we succeed without your knowledge?" Jake smiled and pressed a small device into Theron's hands. It was a modified Korthak communicator that he had been working on in secret. "This contains something more valuable than knowledge. It contains a message to my people on Earth, along with the coordinates of your world. If something happens to me, use this to contact them." "What will you tell them?" Lyra asked. "I'll tell them that the Zilani saved a human when they didn't have to," Jake replied. "I'll tell them that you showed kindness to a stranger, and then I'll explain how the Korthak repaid that kindness. Trust me, my people will understand what that means." The sound of marching feet echoed through the crystal corridors outside their hiding place. Korthak soldiers were getting closer, following scanner readings that would lead them directly to Jake's location. "Go," Jake whispered to his friends. "Use the escape tunnels we mapped. Stay hidden until the search ends. And remember everything I taught you about being free." The Zilani hesitated, unwilling to abandon the human who had opened their eyes to possibilities they never knew existed. But Jake's expression left no room for argument. One by one, they slipped away through concealed passages, leaving Jake alone to face whatever came next. When the Korthak soldiers finally broke through the door, they found Jake standing calmly, in the center of the room. His hands were empty, but his eyes burned with the same fire he had kindled in the hearts of the Zilani people. "Commander Vexthor wants to see you," the lead soldier growled, raising his weapon. Jake smiled. I've been looking forward to meeting him. Commander Vexthor stood in the center of his command chamber like a monument to cruelty. The Korthak fortress was built from black metal that absorbed heat and light, making the interior feel cold and oppressive. Jake was dragged before the commander by 4 heavily armed guards, his hands bound with energy restraints that burned against his skin. So you are the alien who thinks he can corrupt my workers, Vexthor said, his voice carrying the menace of grinding stone. Do you understand what you have done? This settlement was perfectly efficient until you arrived. Now my equipment fails, my schedules are disrupted, and my Zelani show signs of dangerous independence. Jake met the commander's burning gaze without flinching. I understand exactly what I've done. I showed them that they don't have to live as your slaves. I taught them that freedom is worth fighting for, even against impossible odds. Vexithor's claws extended as anger coursed through his massive frame. Freedom is an illusion for the weak. Order is the only truth. The Zelani exist to serve the Korthak Empire, just as all inferior species exist to serve their betters. You have filled their heads with poison that threatens the natural hierarchy of the universe. The only poison here is your empire, Jake replied, his voice steady despite the pain from his restraints. But poison can be cleansed, and tyrants can be overthrown. My people learned that lesson long ago when we cast off the chains of kings and emperors. The commander studied Jake with the calculating gaze of a predator examining unusual prey. Your species interests me, human. You are physically weak compared to the Korthak, yet you speak with the confidence of a warrior. Perhaps I will keep you alive long enough to study your homeworld. Your people might make excellent soldiers for the Empire once they are properly broken. Jake's blood ran cold at the threat to Earth, but he kept his expression neutral. You're welcome to try, but I should warn you that humans have a saying, wake a sleeping dragon at your own peril. We might seem peaceful until you threaten what we care about. Threats from a prisoner are meaningless, Vexthor laughed, the sound like metal scraping against stone. Execute him at dawn in the settlement square. Let the Zelani see what happens to those who disturb the Empire's peace. As the guards prepared to drag Jake to the holding cells, explosions rocked the fortress. Emergency alarms began wailing as reports flooded in from across the settlement. Power systems were failing, communication networks were down, and several Korthak patrol vehicles had mysteriously lost engine power. What is happening? Vexthor roared at his security chief. The equipment failures are accelerating, sir. It's as if every system is breaking down simultaneously. Our technicians can't keep up with the repairs. Jake smiled despite his desperate situation. The Zelani had learned their lessons well. Instead of waiting passively for their teacher's execution, they had launched a coordinated campaign of sabotage that was crippling Korthak operations across the entire settlement. In the chaos of multiple system failures, Jake saw his opportunity. He had been studying the energy restraints during his interrogation, noting their design flaws with an engineer's eye. The Korthak built their equipment to be powerful but not necessarily elegant. They relied on brute force rather than sophisticated engineering. When the lights flickered during another power surge, Jake twisted his wrists in a specific way that caused the restraints to short-circuit. The energy bonds dissolved, leaving his hands free just as another explosion shook the fortress. The guards turned toward the sound of the blast, momentarily distracted from their prisoner. Jake lunged forward, grabbing the nearest guard's weapon, and rolling behind a command console as energy bolts seared the air where he had been standing. The prisoner is loose, the security chief shouted into his communicator. Lock down all exits, he cannot be allowed to escape. But Jake wasn't trying to escape alone. The modified communicator he had given to Theron was now transmitting a signal that guided him through the fortress's corridors. The Zelani resistance had infiltrated the Korthak security systems and was providing him with real-time intelligence about guard positions and patrol routes. Fighting his way through the fortress, Jake reached the vehicle bay where several Korthak transport ships were docked. Theron and 6 other Zelani freedom fighters were waiting for him, their crystalline features pulsing with patterns of determination and fear. The ship is ready, Theron reported, his English improving rapidly under pressure. "But Korthak fighters are launching to intercept us. We may not survive the escape." "Then we make it count," Jake replied, settling into the pilot's seat of the stolen transport. "Sometimes the most important thing isn't surviving, but making sure your sacrifice has meaning." The Zilani strapped themselves into passenger seats as Jake powered up the ship's engines. He had studied Korthak technology during his months in the settlement and understood the basics of their flight systems. More importantly, he understood something the Korthak had never learned: that desperate courage could overcome superior firepower. The transport burst from the fortress's landing bay like a missile fired from a cannon. Korthak fighters immediately scrambled to pursue, their sleek vessels far faster and more maneuverable than the stolen transport. Energy beams lanced past the ship's hull as Jake threw it into a twisting climb toward the upper atmosphere. "They're gaining on us," Lyrali called out from her seat. "Their weapons will penetrate our shields within minutes." Jake's hands danced over the controls, using every trick he had learned as an exploration pilot to stay ahead of his pursuers. He dove through canyons and skimmed over crystal formations, using the planet's geography to break weapon locks and confuse targeting systems. But the Korthak fighters were too fast and too numerous. One by one, they closed the distance and began scoring hits on the transport's hull. Warning alarms screamed as critical systems began failing under the sustained attack. "We're not going to make it," Theron said, his light patterns flickering with resignation. "Yes, we are," Jake replied, making a decision that would haunt the Zilani for generations. "But not all of us." He activated the ship's autopilot and programmed it with a course that would take the Zilani to the edge of the solar system, beyond the reach of Korthak patrol ships. Then he sealed himself into the pilot's compartment and prepared to buy them the time they needed. "Jake, what are you doing?" Lyrali pounded on the sealed door that separated them. "What humans have always done when freedom was at stake," he replied through the intercom. "I'm making sure the people I care about have a chance to live free." Jake spun the ship around to face the pursuing fighters, accelerating directly toward them in a move that violated every rule of space combat. The Korthak pilots, confused by this suicidal maneuver, hesitated for just a moment before opening fire with everything they had. The transport's hull buckled under the concentrated assault, but Jake held his course. At the last possible second, he triggered the ship's emergency systems, ejecting the passenger compartment containing the Zilani, while the main section continued its kamikaze run toward the enemy fighters. The explosion lit up the planet's upper atmosphere like a second sun. When the light faded, debris from the transport and 3 Korthak fighters drifted in slowly expanding clouds of twisted metal. The ejected passenger pod, protected by its own shields and life support systems, continued on its programmed course toward the outer system. Inside, 7 Zilani mourned the human who had given his life to ensure their freedom, while Lyrali clutched the communicator that would carry Jake's final message to the stars. As the pod's engines carried them beyond Korthak territory, Lyrali activated the device and began transmitting toward Earth. The message was simple but powerful. The story of Jake Morrison, the human who crashed on their world and taught them the meaning of freedom, only to die defending the very people who had saved his life. It would take months for the message to reach Earth, but when it did, it would change everything. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone saved a human, and then that human was murdered by tyrants who didn't understand the bonds of gratitude that held human civilization together. In the depths of space, 7 Zilani refugees carried that message toward an uncertain future, not knowing that they were about to witness the fury of an awakened humanity. The strange ship appeared on Earth's orbital sensors 6 months after Jake Morrison was officially declared missing. It was unlike anything in human technology, with curves of crystalline metal that seemed to grow rather than being built. Admiral Kate Sullivan received the alert at Orbital Command Station while reviewing reports about the failed rescue mission to find Jake's lost exploration vessel. "Unknown vessel approaching Earth," reported Lieutenant Commander Ryan Torres from the sensor station. "It's broadcasting on all frequencies with what appears to be a distress signal. The transmission includes human language patterns and the identification code from Captain Morrison's ship." Admiral Sullivan felt her heart skip a beat. Jake Morrison had been her student at the Naval Academy 15 years ago, one of the brightest officers she had ever trained. His loss during the deep space exploration mission had hit her harder than she cared to admit. "Open communication channels," she ordered. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The main screen flickered to life, showing a tall, graceful being with skin like living crystal. Soft blue light pulsed beneath its transparent flesh in patterns that seemed to convey emotion. When it spoke, the words came in carefully pronounced, English with an accent unlike anything human linguists had ever encountered. "I am Lyra Lai of the Zalani people," the alien said. "I carry a message from Jake Morrison of Earth. He saved my people from slavery, but he died defending us from those who would keep us in chains. I have come to honor his sacrifice by telling his story to his own kind." The transmission continued. For 3 hours, as Lyra Lai described everything that had happened on Kepler 442b. She spoke of finding Jake in the wreckage of his ship, of the months spent healing his broken body, and of the friendship that grew between human and alien. She told of the Korthak Empire and their cruel domination of her peaceful people. Most importantly, she described how Jake had chosen to stay and fight rather than wait for rescue. She showed recordings made with Zalani technology that captured his final battle, his sacrifice, and his dying words. "Tell them the Zalani saved a human. My people will understand what that means." When the transmission ended, Admiral Sullivan sat in stunned silence. First contact with alien life had always been theoretical, something that might happen in the distant future. Instead, it had come in the form of tragedy and a debt of honor that demanded payment. Within hours, the story spread across Earth's communication networks. News agencies broadcast Lyra Lai's testimony to every continent. Social media exploded, with images of the gentle alien who had risked everything to bring word of Jake Morrison's sacrifice. Politicians and military leaders held emergency sessions to decide how humanity should respond. Dr. Alex Chen, Earth's leading expert on theoretical xenobiology, was among the first to meet with Lyra Lai face-to-face. Her damaged ship had been granted permission to dock at Luna Station, where a team of scientists and diplomats waited to make formal contact with humanity's first alien visitor. "Your physiology is remarkable," Dr. Chen observed as he ran medical scans with Lyra Lai's permission. "Your people seem to be silicon-based rather than carbon-based like humans. The fact that you were able to heal Jake's injuries suggests incredible medical knowledge." Lyra Lai's light patterns showed sadness mixed with pride. "Jake was difficult to heal because human bodies are so different from ours. But we learned much from studying his wounds. Humans are far more resilient than any species we had encountered. Your bones are dense like stone, your muscles strong like metal cables, and your spirits burn with fire that cannot be extinguished." General Lisa Parker, head of Earth's Military Planning Division, listened to every word of Lyra Lai's testimony with growing anger. She had served in conflicts around the world and understood the language of oppression and resistance. The story of the Korthak Empire's brutality against innocent people stirred something deep in her warrior's heart. "How many Korthak ships patrol your system?" she asked during one of the debriefing sessions. "Perhaps 50 combat vessels," Lyra Lai replied. "Why do you ask this question?" General Parker's smile was cold as winter steel. "Because I'm wondering how many ships we'll need to kill them all." The political debate raged for weeks across Earth's governments. Some leaders argued that humanity had no business interfering in alien conflicts. Others insisted that Jake's sacrifice created a moral obligation that transcended politics. Religious leaders spoke of divine purposes and humanity's role as protectors of the innocent. President Martin Hughes called for a joint session of the Global Defense Council, bringing together representatives from every major nation on Earth. The debate was broadcast live to billions of viewers who watched their leaders grapple with humanity's first interstellar crisis. "We stand at a crossroads," President Hughes said in his opening address. "We can choose to remain isolated on our single world, safe but selfish, or we can honor the sacrifice of Jake Morrison by standing with those who showed him mercy in his darkest hour." The Chinese representative, Ambassador Li Wei, raised concerns about the enormous cost and risk of interstellar warfare. "We know nothing about these Korthak beyond what this alien has told us. How do we know this is not some elaborate deception designed to drag humanity into a conflict that is none of our concern? But Admiral Sullivan spoke for many when she addressed those doubts directly. I knew Jake Morrison for 15 years. He was a good man, an honorable officer, and a loyal human being. If he chose to fight and die for these people, then they were worth fighting for. That's all the proof I need. The final vote was closer than many expected, but the decision was clear. Humanity would intervene on behalf of the Zelani people. The resolution passed by a margin of 63%, with strong support from nations that had their own histories of struggling against oppression. Construction began immediately on the largest military fleet in human history. Shipyards on Earth, Luna, Mars, and the asteroid colonies worked around the clock to build vessels capable of interstellar warfare. Military ships were joined by converted civilian craft as volunteers from across human space enlisted in what the media called Jake's Crusade. Dr. Chen worked with Lorelei to understand Korthak technology and develop countermeasures. The alien empire's weapons were more advanced than anything humans possessed, but their tactics were rigid and predictable. They had never fought an enemy that valued individual initiative over strict obedience to orders. The Korthak believed that discipline is strength, Lorelei explained during one strategy session. They follow battle plans exactly as written and expect their enemies to do the same. Jake told me that humans fight differently, with what he called creative chaos. Perhaps this will give you advantages they cannot anticipate. General Parker smiled as she studied the tactical assessments. Human military doctrine had always emphasized adaptability and independent thinking at every level of command. Soldiers were trained to take initiative when communications failed and to improvise solutions when standard tactics didn't work. 6 months after Lorelei's arrival, the fleet was ready. Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of the flagship UES Defiance, looking out at 237 vessels stretched across space like a constellation of human determination. The ships ranged from massive battleships to converted cargo haulers, all crewed by volunteers who had sworn to honor Jake Morrison's sacrifice. All ships report ready for departure, announced Commander Torres from the communications station. Admiral Sullivan activated the fleet-wide communication system. This is Admiral Sullivan to all vessels. Today we begin humanity's first interstellar military operation. We go not as conquerors, but as liberators. We carry with us the memory of Jake Morrison and the hopes of the Zelani people. May we prove worthy of both. The fleet activated their faster-than-light engines in perfect synchronization, disappearing from Earth's solar system in flashes of brilliant light. Behind them, they left a world united in purpose for the first time in human history. Ahead of them lay the unknown dangers of interstellar war, and the chance to prove that humanity would never abandon those who had shown kindness to one of their own. The galaxy was about to learn what humans meant when they spoke of loyalty, honor, and the unbreakable bonds that held their civilization together. In the depths of space, Admiral Sullivan studied the star charts showing their destination. Kepler 442b was 8 months away at maximum speed. By the time they arrived, the Korthak would have had over a year to consolidate their control and prepare their defenses. It wouldn't matter. Human history was filled with stories of impossible victories against overwhelming odds. Today, they would add another chapter to that proud tradition in the name of Jake Morrison and the alien people who had saved his life. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, like an avenging storm. 237 ships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the reflected light of the distant star. Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching as her sensors identified 43 Korthak vessels patrolling the system. "They're hailing us," reported Commander Torres from the communication station. "Audio only, very demanding tone. Put them through," Admiral Sullivan ordered. The bridge speakers crackled with the harsh voice of Fleet Commander Zarthul, the Korthak military leader who controlled this sector of their empire. "Unknown vessels, you have entered restricted Korthak territory without authorization. Identify yourselves immediately or face destruction." Admiral Sullivan activated her own transmitter, speaking in the clear, calm voice that had commanded respect throughout human space. "This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Terran Defense Fleet. We are here to liberate the Zalani people from your illegal occupation of their homeworld. You have exactly 1 hour to evacuate all Korthak personnel from the planet's surface. The response came back filled with what could only be described as contemptuous laughter. You dare threaten the Korthak Empire with your primitive vessels? We have conquered a dozen species more advanced than yours. Withdraw immediately, or we will add humanity to our list of extinct civilizations. Then you have chosen your fate, Admiral Sullivan replied. All human vessels, this is your admiral speaking. You know why we're here. You know what they did. To Jake Morrison. Show them what happens when someone hurts one of our own. The space battle began with the Korthak, confident in their technological superiority. Their ships were faster, their shields stronger, and their weapons more powerful than anything in the human fleet. Fleet Commander Zarthul ordered a standard battle formation, expecting the inferior aliens to crumble under the first assault. But humans had never fought a standard battle in their entire history. As the Korthak ships advanced in perfect lines, the human fleet scattered like a flock of birds, each vessel following its own course toward the enemy. Some ships dove below the plane of battle, others climbed high above it, and a few charged straight forward in apparent suicide runs. Captain Ryan Torres commanded the destroyer UES Vengeance in the center of the chaotic human formation. When Korthak fighters swarmed toward his ship, he did something no rational commander would attempt. He flew directly into an asteroid field at full speed, using the floating rocks as cover, while his gunners picked off pursuing enemies one by one. The converted cargo ship New Frontier, commanded by civilian volunteer Captain Amy Foster, revealed the first of many surprises the humans had prepared. When Korthak cruisers moved to destroy what they assumed was an easy target, hidden panels opened along the ship's hull to reveal massive industrial mining charges designed for breaking up asteroids. The explosion that followed when those charges detonated against Korthak shields lit up space like a miniature star. 3 enemy vessels were destroyed instantly, while 2 others were left crippled and drifting. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human ingenuity met Korthak rigidity. Construction mechs from converted civilian ships grappled, with Korthak fighters in zero-gravity wrestling matches. Industrial lasers meant for cutting metal beams sliced through enemy armor like paper. Even damaged human ships became weapons as their crews deliberately crashed them into high-value targets. Fleet Commander Zarthul watched the chaos from his command ship with growing alarm. His perfectly organized battle plan was collapsing as the humans refused to fight according to any logical pattern. How could he counter enemies who seemed to make tactical decisions based on individual initiative rather than central command? All ships fall back to defensive formation, he ordered. These aliens fight like madmen. We must regroup and reassess their capabilities. But Admiral Sullivan had anticipated this reaction. As the Korthak fleet pulled back toward the planet, the second phase of the human attack began. Smaller ships that had been hidden among the asteroids emerged to strike at the enemy's flanks, while the main fleet pressed forward with relentless determination. The battle raged for 18 hours without pause. Human casualties mounted steadily as Korthak firepower took its toll. But for every human ship destroyed, 2 Korthak vessels were eliminated by tactics that seemed to border on insanity. The humans fought with a fury that the galaxy had never seen before, as if each individual warrior carried a personal grudge against their enemies. On the planet's surface, Colonel Amy Foster led the first wave of human Marines in a simultaneous assault on Korthak ground installations. They had studied the layout of the settlements from Lyralay's intelligence reports and planned their attacks to minimize civilian casualties while maximizing damage to military targets. The Zalani people, inspired by the sight of human ships filling their sky, rose up in planet-wide rebellion. Led by Theron and other survivors of Jake's original resistance movement, they seized control of power stations, communication centers, and weapon depots. For the first time in 50 years, the crystalline beings fought back against their oppressors, with the techniques Jake Morrison had taught them. Lyralay herself led a strike team that captured the main Korthak command center in the capital settlement. When she found Commander Vexthor, the brutal overseer who had ordered Jake's execution, her light patterns blazed with colors of justice and remembrance. "You killed Jake Morrison," she said in perfect English, her voice carrying the weight of an entire people's anger. "He came to our world as a stranger, and we saved his life. He repaid that kindness by teaching us how to be free. You repaid it by murdering him." Vexthor snarled defiance even in defeat. "Your pet human was a disease that infected my perfect order. I would kill him again if I had the chance." For a moment, Lyralei's hand moved toward the energy weapon she carried. The desire for revenge burned in her crystalline heart like molten metal. But then she remembered Jake's words about the difference between justice and vengeance, about choosing who to save rather than who to destroy. "Jake taught us that strength isn't about who you can kill," she said, lowering her weapon. "It's about who you choose to spare. You will stand trial for your crimes, but you will live to see the free world your cruelty helped create." The space battle reached its climax when Fleet Commander Zarthul, desperate to salvage something from the disaster, ordered his remaining ships to bombard the planet's surface. If the Korthak couldn't keep their slaves, they would destroy them, rather than let them go free. Captain Torres, his destroyer badly damaged but still fighting, saw the enemy ships turning toward the planet and made the same choice Jake Morrison had made months earlier. He set his ship on a collision course with the Korthak flagship, pushing his failing engines to maximum power. "This is for Jake Morrison," he transmitted to the fleet as his ship accelerated toward certain death. "And for all the innocent people who deserve to live free." The impact between the UES Vengeance and the Korthak command ship created a fireball that was visible from the planet's surface. Both vessels were destroyed instantly, taking Fleet Commander Zarthul and his senior staff with them. The remaining Korthak ships, leaderless and demoralized, began surrendering to the human fleet. When the smoke cleared and the last enemy vessel had been captured or destroyed, Admiral Sullivan stood in the crystal gardens of the main Zalani settlement, accepting the formal surrender of the surviving Korthak forces. Around her, humans and Zalani worked together to treat the wounded and begin rebuilding what the war had damaged. Lirelei approached the Admiral with patterns of gratitude flowing across her transparent skin. "Your people have given us the greatest gift possible," she said. "You have given us our freedom. How can we ever repay such a debt?" Admiral Sullivan smiled, thinking of the young exploration captain who had started this chain of events with a simple act of survival and gratitude. "Jake Morrison already paid that debt with his life. He told you that your kindness to one human would matter to all humans. Today, we proved he was right." In the months that followed, the liberation of Kepler 442b sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. News of the human victory spread to dozens of worlds where other species lived under Korthak oppression. Resistance movements began forming across the Empire as subject peoples realized that the seemingly invincible conquerors could be defeated. The Human-Zalani Alliance became the foundation for a growing coalition of free worlds. Lirelei served as the first alien ambassador to Earth, while human advisors helped the Zalani rebuild their society as an independent democracy. The story of Jake Morrison became required learning in schools on both worlds, a reminder that individual choices could change the fate of entire civilizations. Years later, when historians tried to analyze how one man's sacrifice had transformed interstellar politics, they always came back to the same conclusion. Jake Morrison had understood something fundamental about human nature, that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military power, but their absolute refusal to abandon those who had shown them kindness.